Hi, I'm Dave Harper, or Ninja Dave if you prefer, and in this video I'm going to do a walkthrough of the DJ.Studio mixing software for PC. I'm going to talk about the interface and how the features within DJ.Studio work for us as Neurodynamic Breathwork Facilitators. So I'm just completing my own training as a breathwork facilitator, and I was excited about the possibility of creating my own music sets for use in my own sessions. I looked at Audacity and it didn't really give me the flexibility that I wanted. So I went out searching for another piece of software, and I liked the way that DJ.Studio presented itself and opted for this particular package. Now at this moment in time there is a sale on, and I did go for the Pro package. So the demo that I'm going to be showing you today is using DJ.Studio Pro. I thought for the price that it was unbeatable, and I was very happy to pay that for the features that DJ.Studio is offering me. So let's delve into the software then. Here we can see, if I move me and some logos out of the way, the main DJ.Studio home page. I've got a couple of tracks that I've been playing with in DJ.Studio, so I haven't used it extensively yet, but I've got a good feel for how the software works. Now, it is different to other software that I've used. I'm an experienced software user. I've done some software testing and software development, so I have a good idea how to use different packages of software. I've also done some video editing in the past for personal use, so the idea of using sound waves and tracks is fairly familiar to me. Even so, the first 3 or 4 days of starting to use DJ.Studio totally frustrated me. It just did not seem to be doing anything logically at all that I wanted it to do. And after a few days I just relaxed and decided that I'll just let DJ.Studio work the way that it wants to work, and from then on things have been a lot smoother. So I'm going to talk you through some of the features of DJ.Studio and how they are relevant to breathwork music sets creation, and a bunch of the features within DJ.Studio that are not relevant to us at all. Now, DJ.Studio, as its name suggests, is designed for DJs who want to create mixes for party and disco sets. In that way, it kind of works in a similar way to a normal physical double deck, and DJ.Studio only offers us 2 decks to work with, like conventional hardware mixing decks that I've got no experience with whatsoever, but I do know what they look like, as that image shows. And this is the way that DJ.Studio approaches the mixing of its music. We can only mix between 2 tracks at any one time. So rather than me blurb on about this, let me show you. I'm not going to go into a full walkthrough of every feature of DJ.Studio. Some of it is just conventional options and settings. But let's talk about a rather unique way that DJ.Studio works first. It has 2 ways of working. One is with local music files. These are music files stored on your local hard drive. And secondly, it works with a kind of strange interface with YouTube. We'll get into that a bit more when I show you one of these Spotify tests. Now, it has links to YouTube, as the menu here suggests, and links to 1001 track lists. If I click on that, then we can search for previous track lists that other DJs have created, and we can import them, and we can remix them and change them and re-export them in our own particular format. But I didn't find that these were much use to us for neurodynamic breathwork sets, because they tended to all be house music focused and styled. So I haven't actually used this. I've tried one or two imports, but I haven't used it extensively. I may be doing it a slight disservice, but there wasn't anything of particular interest in there for me. It also has links to Spotify. Now, if I click that, that's interesting. It allows us to enter a Spotify URL of a song, and we can also drop an entire Spotify playlist into this section, and it will import tracks from Spotify. Let's not go too excited about that, although it is a major feature of DJ.Studio. And it also allows us to work with YouTube. I'll show you that in a moment as I create a new set as we work through this. So let's go back home. I will go into some of the settings, which is up here in the top right, as we go through later on. And I also want to talk about the library feature within DJ.Studio, which really is probably its worst feature. And I'll come back to that later on. The Academy, as we can see down here, is a very small series of basic videos into some of the features of DJ.Studio. It gives you a flavour of some of the basics, like adding tracks and that, but we're going to cover all of that in this demo today. So the best thing to do is to just get started, and we're going to put together a YouTube music set today. This, I find, is probably one of the best features for us as breathwork facilitators. But the only thing that creating a YouTube music set allows us to do, in my mind, is to prototype a music set. Other than that, it's no use to us whatsoever. And I'll describe that as we go through it. So we're going to start a new mix, and I can either do that by creating a new mix here or choosing this start new mix. This one's a little bit odd because it looks like it's sitting within the local music section, but when we click on it, it asks us, do we want to create a mix of local files or a YouTube mix? I don't use Beatport, so I haven't attempted to use that one myself. We're going to create a YouTube mix in this video to start off with. Now, it starts by opening up the Add Tracks panel for us, and because we've chosen that we want it to be YouTube, then it takes us to this YouTube panel here. In here we can search for any piece of video or music on YouTube. So these are some recent searches that I've done. If we go for tribal, then it'll give us a list of music that links through to these tribal sets. So if we just want to scroll down and say pick one, this tribal beat sound system, it'll now give us this preview of that video so that we can see if it's suitable for our music set. Again, the considerations here for our use of the music from YouTube becomes more apparent when we consider the licensing of these pieces. Do we have any, although this video has been uploaded by Benjamin Boo, is he the creator? I don't know. He may well be. It may be possible we can get in touch with him to ask about licensing this track for use in our music sets. But I'm not going to discuss licensing in this, but it is a consideration obviously when picking YouTube tracks like this. But just for completeness, I will let's import this one. Let's assume that we're going to use this one, and out of all of these tracks that is brought up for tribal, I can select it by clicking on the plus over here. DJ.Studio has already attempted to tell us what key the music is in and what the beats per minute setting for this particular track is. So we can add this track to our mix, and it imports the track into our mix so that we can start working with it locally. So that was the first option, to import a YouTube video. If we go back to the library, now we look at importing a Spotify track. And if I just call up my Spotify, and we'll come and discuss this later when I'm talking about libraries or playlists. For now, I've got some playlists in Spotify. I've got one here for NDB, and let's just pick a track from here. The way that we get a track from Spotify into DJ.Studio is we can either use the standard way of sharing and copying the song link, or for ease of use we can merely drag it across onto the Spotify tab within DJ.Studio. Now, I don't know if you noticed that message that popped up there. It's very interesting how this works. What has just happened is that I've imported that track from Spotify, but DJ.Studio seems to have converted it into a YouTube track. And this is something that happens in the background, and the way that DJ.Studio works is, although I've grabbed that music from Spotify that may not already have existed on YouTube, it appears that what DJ.Studio has done now in the background is uploaded that track to YouTube and then imported it from YouTube in the same way as it imported the other YouTube track. It's an interesting way of doing it, and it has probably something to do with licensing restrictions on the way that DJ.Studio can use and implement and import music from these YouTube and Spotify and other systems. So we've now got two tracks, and what we're going to look at now is the main studio tab. So these four options up here are, we'll call them tabs, although they look more like buttons. We'll call them tabs, and we're going to switch over to the main editing tab, which is the studio tab, and we'll see what DJ.Studio has done to these two tracks that we've just imported into it. Right, this is the main DJ.Studio editing window. Let me just minimize that, because that's normally on your system would be minimized like that. Going back to my discussion of DJ.Studio working like a set of physical mixing desks, DJ.Studio only gives us these two deck tracks that we can work with. So we've got deck 1 and deck 2, and literally we load a piece of music onto one deck, and then we transition from that deck to the second deck, which has got another piece of music loaded into it. Now this is where DJ.Studio does a lot of the work for us, but DJ.Studio creates this automatic transition here, this blue rectangle with rounded corners. This is the transition segment of these two tracks between the two decks. If I use the mouse wheel to zoom in by pushing it upwards, and we can see that the track here, the white line that it's showing us is the volume of this particular track during that transition period. Similarly to the track above the white line, we can see that it fades out by the volume coming down, and the second track, the second deck, fades in by the volume coming up. The yellow line is the bass transition of the two tracks, and we'll look at this in a moment. But let's just play this and see what DJ Studio has done for us. That's actually not too bad. Okay, that's given us quite a nice smooth blend of fade in between those two tracks. So we would be quite happy with that for what it's done there. Now, if we expand this BPM auto once again, the reason it says auto is because it's set to auto beats per minute change, and from halfway through we can see that this first track, the Benjamin Boo one, is at 144 beats per minute, and if we click on the track, we've got the track information highlighted down here in these tabs, and we can see that this is 144 beats per minute. We can change that, but we're going to leave it as it is because we've got no reason to change make changes to the speed or number of beats in that particular track. If we go to the second piece, we can see that that track is at 145.61. Actually, that's not entirely true, because what it's telling us is what the beats per minute are at the playhead. So if we just move this on to this particular one, and actually what it has done is it's auto adjusted it to 146 for us. So it's just nudged that up slightly more, and just to transition that track in better for us. Now, it may be that we don't want it to transition from halfway, and similarly for these beat from the bass tracks to switch over at halfway, and this is all part of this transition section here. Another thing that this transition section is telling us up here in the right is that the first track is at using the key signature 6A, and the second track is the key signature 1A. I'll describe briefly what that is in a moment, but it's in light blue, which means that DJ Studio is fairly happy with this transition from this key signature to the key signature of the second track. And the reason that it's done this is because of some settings within the settings panel of DJ Studio. So if we have a look briefly at those settings, and in the settings we can have a look in the transitions section. Actually, just before I do that, let's talk briefly about this key notation. The 3A to the 1A is what's called Camelot key, and we can change that if we want so that it shows normal musical notation for the key signatures of a track. This Camelot key seems to be, I don't know, the new thing for DJs. I looked it up briefly. You can go and check it online, see what it's doing. I'll describe it a little bit later when I look at the library management, but for now that's the reason that it's showing 1A, 12B, 3A, 3B, because it's set to this Camelot key. But if we have a look in the transition section, we find out why it's done what it's done. So when DJ Studio applies an automatic transition when we import tracks, no matter how many, every time it transitions from one track to another, it uses these settings. So it uses a bass swap to convert those bass beats from one track to another. And then it decides how many bars in length that would be best used to do this transition. It's set to automatic, so we're letting DJ Studio do its own computation for this. If we wanted, we could set a fixed number of bars and then adjust it later from there. It also has this synchronized tempo option, and we can see that it's set to second half. So that's why it only adjusts the tempo of the beats per minute in that second half of the transition. We could set it to full so that any speed adjustments from one track to another happen across the entirety of the transition. And we can adjust that manually later on. Also, the in mix points and the out mix points, we're leaving these as 0 bars. We're not worrying about that. And the track beat mode, it's going to repitch the track beats so that they get fine adjustment as it transitions in that synchronizing of the tempo from one track to another. So that's the reason these things have happened here, these bass swaps and the volume changes, fading in, fading out. But we can change this if we didn't want that at 50%, which is where the auto setting is. We can simply grab hold of it and drag it back to the left. And now that tempo change will happen over more slowly over the entire width of this transition section of the 2 tracks. We can also look at this transition section by choosing this transition tab down the bottom. So instead of having the track info that we're currently viewing, if we go to the transition, it shows us what's happening inside this transition section. And like we had set in the settings, for the volume, it's done a crossfade at 50%, and it's done a bass swap with this 0 offset. Now, the presets for this particular transition are what's called a bass swap. So we could change that, we could crossfade it, and you'll see that the volume and the fadings change here as we adjust it. So it's not doing a bass swap, it's just doing a volume crossfade. High to lows, low to highs, the opposites, and these are low to high pitches that is adjusting here. Or we could echo out, but it's quite unlikely that we're going to use the echo out feature in our breathwork transitions now, so I'll just undo those back to our standard crossfades and our bass swap. So I showed that we adjusted this manually for the beats per minute change. We can also adjust the volume and the bass swap manually. The bass swap here is set to 0 offset. If we click on this, then as we increase the offset, we'll see that this offset in the first track reduces. So as we increase this, it pulls it back a certain number of beats. So the offset between the 2 bass swap outs. Similarly, for the crossfade of the volume, we can change this to adjust the way that the volume fades. So it now does it over 75% of the entire transition section, 100%, so it starts adjusting it immediately. And the lowest can be 25%, which is a much faster fade in and drop out. But none of these may be suitable to us, and that allows us instead to have manual settings. And when we click the manual volume setting, it zeroes out the volume for both of the tracks, and now it's up to us to pick a point within that volume track, and by holding down the mouse button I can now drag that volume setting to where I want it and at which point or how slowly or quickly I want the volume to drop out. If I don't want a linear change in volume, then I can create another point simply by pointing at the volume and dragging it, so we can create all sorts of weird and wacky volume dropouts if necessary. If If I want to get rid of one of these points, I can just click on it and it'll delete it and return back to normal. Similarly for the fade in, I've just simply clicked on the volume bar and I'm dragging it down. So we're going to fade in right from the beginning, and we're gradually going to fade in, and we want the volume to come in higher at this point as that one fades out. So that one now sounds like this. Okay, so that all works quite nicely. Again, there's no real difference there between what we've just set manually and what the automatic settings were. So I'm just going to set it back to what it was automatically before we started playing with these settings. But I just want to show you that it's quite possible to adjust these transitions manually after DJ.Studio has applied its automatic settings to them. As it happens, what the automatic settings that it picked for us were quite nice. Okay, let's have a look a bit more at the interface that we're working with here. This is part of what really started to confuse me early on. There's a little bar at the top here which gives us a representation of the entire music set that we are constructing, and this is kind of our zoom and viewport window. So if I point at it with a mouse, I can hold the mouse button down and I can drag it left and right so that I can move along the entire music set. And we can see here it's shown in blue, there's a transition at this point, so we can zoom quickly to that transition or continue further towards the end. While I'm holding my mouse button down and dragging this left and right, I can also push the mouse itself upwards or pull it downwards. As I pull it downwards, it zooms into the music track itself and brings us down into the individual beats of the track if we wish to zoom that far. Or again, if I hold it and push upwards with the mouse, we actually zoom out to see a much larger section of the track set. And again, we can zoom that left and right as we need to. So it gives very quick access to zooming and moving around our music set, which takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's actually a really, really quick and easy way and quite unique way that I've come across of moving around long mix sets like this. Okay, we've also got the time of the mix set starting from 0 up to the full length of the track, which is 3.2468, so about 4.5 minutes in total. Now, one thing that I have requested, and it doesn't have it within DJ.Studio at the moment, is for individual tracks themselves to have hour and a minute and second timings on them. We can see that they've got the beats indicated at the top of each track, and again if I zoom in using the mouse wheel, so each beat is counted but not an actual physical time. And the reason I would find it useful to have times in there is a lot of times if I'm listening to a music track on Spotify, I'll notice or I'll note down that I only want it from say a minute to 4 minutes within, but when I import it into DJ.Studio, there's no way of actually knowing where that minute is. Obviously we know how many beats per minute there are, 146, so we could say, well, okay, in this case if I want to start at 30 seconds then I've got to divide that by 2 and then I'm 30 seconds into the track. But it would just be nice if it had a minute and second setting, which it doesn't at this time. Okay, so we've looked at most of the main tabs across the top. We'll click on the carousel tab, and this is just a different view of the entire track set I'm going to go back to the beginning of the music set, and it's a bit awkward to click on the left hand edge there to go back to 0 0, so I can just press the home key and it'll return me back to the beginning of the track set. Now what's quite nice is I'm not going to do it from there. Let's do it from about here, and in this carousel we can quickly see what our music set is made up of. So we've got the first music track, then we have a bass swap transition leading us into the second music track, or the second deck. And when we press play, it's got this one highlighted because it's currently playing this first deck, or this first music track. As we move into the actual transition, it expands the transition to show us what it's doing. It's got an 8-beat bass swap that is currently playing out. And as that comes out, it takes us to the next track, and as we add extra tracks, extra songs in here, it'll lead us through them. So it's quite a nice way of just watching it going through and previewing the track set from that view. But most of the time we can do all of this from the studio view. So let's have a look down the bottom, and some of the features that we have here. Because we're creating a YouTube mix at the moment, it doesn't allow us to add samples into the mix. Samples are only available in local file projects, so I'll come back to that a bit later when we look at local files. We can look at the automations. Now, we are not really going to use these. We're not going to play with these in our breathwork mixes, so we can fairly much ignore that. We're not going to be adding flanges and echoes or FXs or white noise generally to our music sets, because all we're looking at is the transition from one piece to another. We're not really going to play with the equalizers or the low, medium and high tones, or adjust the volume other than within the transition place, except for maybe the last phase when we've got the very quiet meditative music at the end of a set. Video again is only available for YouTube mixes, but again this is of no relevance to us because we are never ever going to upload our music set to YouTube. Now we've already looked at the track, and it gives us information about the track that's been imported. We can repitch a track if we wish to, but we can do all of the transitions that we need here. One interesting thing that you might have noticed is when I do click play, we get a pop-up window. And again, this is only for YouTube mixes. And part of the licensing between DJ.Studio and creating YouTube mixes is that they have to show this video. So if I attempt to close this window, we'll get a pop-up saying YouTube rules dictate that the player must always be present. You can't get rid of it. There's nothing you can do to get rid of it. You can move it around. You can't resize it. I just grabbed what was underneath there. So you're pretty much stuck with this when creating this, what they call YouTube mixes, and that will be part of the license restrictions for the way that they do the importing and exporting. It's not really a problem, but it's just something to pay attention to. Okay, if we look at the transitions, we've already looked at transitions. Again, we won't be really using any of these effects, ins, outs, side chains, mids, highs, filters, noise. We will just simply be using the bass swaps, maybe bass fades, and the volume changes here. This is the main features that we're always going to be using for our breathwork sets within DJ.Studio. The playlist gives us a bottom lower half view of what the full playlist tab shows us. just in case we need to switch up and down between the playlists, or we want to reorganize tracks. Again, as we click on different tracks in the playlist, it'll highlight it here in the mix for us. And I managed to pick the transition there. We can also reorder these. So if I reorder this and move the second track to the first, DJ.Studio is automatically now going to remix it for us, which is quite impressive. So we've just swapped those two tracks over, and it's now done an automatic remix of the two for us. And if we see what that sounds like. Again, quite a smooth transition between the two. I don't want it that way around, so we'll return it to normal as we originally imported it. Let's zoom that back out so we can see what's happening. And finally, there's a zoom option which just gets rid of the bottom panel entirely and gives us the full studio view for working with the decks and the transitions. But as we kind of click on these, there's a setting up in settings that automatically expand the crossfade transition sections when we open it, and it zooms in slightly to let us work easier with it. We can come back to the transition tab down here if we want to change these to manual or change some of the settings in there. And that is pretty much everything that we're going to be doing in DJ.Studio, is working within these transition sections between tracks. Now if I go back to the playlist, I've already said it shows us up here that it's going from a 6A key to a 1A key. We can see that down here in the playlist. The first track is in key 6A and the second track is in 1A. In the match column, it's kind of it thinks it can work it out for us, and it's doing some sort of Jaws mix between the two, which is kind of the sawtooth, I guess, is what it's calling quite humorously, the Jaws mix. But sometimes it will tell us, hang on, there's a problem here, there's such a big step between two tracks that it's going to cause a problem. Now this is not going to cause a problem for us in breathwork. We're not worried about these transitions from these different key signatures. They don't really apply to us. This applies mostly to DJs who want a very quick and automatic way of knocking together a playlist for a party or whatever event that they're running. They can import an entire playlist from Spotify into DJ.Studio. It will order it, it will do a check to see if the tracks fit well together, and if not, it will give us this auto mix option. And what that does is it will attempt to reorder the songs into the best order to give smooth transitions from one song to another. We're never going to use that in breathwork because we need to set our songs in a very specific order to achieve the music trajectory that we want to create for our breathwork session. So that's another feature that we just will not use in DJ.Studio, although it is a powerful one if we were DJs creating standard music sets. Secondly, in a YouTube mix, which is what we are creating here, if we look to export this mix, so we've imported a load of songs from Spotify or YouTube, and we think that's a great mix, that's a good breathwork set, let's export it so that I can begin to use it. You can't do that in DJ.Studio. If I click on export, but we'll give it a name, demo 1. Okay, so when we click on export, because this is a YouTube mix that we're creating, the only export option that we have is to publish it as a mix online. Now, it's a very strange way that DJ.Studio does this. Again, we can't even export it as a video and upload it to YouTube, even though this is a YouTube mix. It's to do with, again, licensing with DJ.Studio is what I'm guessing. We can't export it to a local MP3 WAV or video file. In fact, all of these on the bottom are impossible. All we can do is back it up or publish it. And this publishing option kind of publishes it into somewhere in DJ.Studio. So if we come out of this mix and we look at one that I created earlier, this test Spotify one, which I had published, and I've left it published just for this demo, but again, we would never be publishing our music breathwork set up onto anybody else's system. In fact, this is part of our proprietary rights as the breathwork facilitator to own the music that we create and to add those unique flavors into it. So we're never going to want to put that publicly anywhere. So this is the music that I put together here, and I did end up publishing this one. So if we look at the published version of this, it's just test Spotify, and if we go to the URL here for this mix, so if I just copy that URL and show you what it's done, it's kind of done something really strange here, because when it publishes a mix, it publishes it to the DJ.Studio server, and this again is to do with the licensing. Yet when we start to play our track list, each of these tracks has actually been published on YouTube somewhere. I can't quite work out where it's put it, whether it's put it up as an unlisted track, I'm not sure, because while it's playing the track back, it shows that we can look at it on YouTube, and if I click on that, all it's done is it's published that single individual track onto YouTube somewhere. I'm not quite sure where. Look, there's 17 videos in here, 57 subscribers. I'm not sure more about this channel. It was auto-generated by YouTube, so there's something funky going on behind the scenes in order to meet the licensing requirements of being able to share and publish these track lists that we create within this YouTube part of DJ.Studio. So we'll never ever want to do that. So basically all that this is saying is that anything that we create within this YouTube section is purely for us to prototype our music set. There's nothing we can do to it. We can't export it, we can't convert it into a local version of the music set. It is literally a chance for us to quickly prototype by pulling songs in from YouTube and Spotify to gather a playlist together. We would then need to go and purchase each of the tracks individually to have the physical downloads for them, and then we would have to go and seek licensing for each of the individual tracks to allow us to use those tracks in our own music set. And once we purchased the tracks and downloaded them to our local hard drive, we would then go into local music, start a new mix and create a new mix using the local files, and then we would manually have to import those music files back in to DJ.Studio into that local music mix. And when we do that, again, these are just a few local files that I pulled together to test on this. This now is a local set, and the interface has changed slightly, but I just want to show you the export feature first. If we click on export, then we've now got the ability to export to a much wider range of sources or destinations, one being to export to MP3 WAV or video, which is what we are likely to use more often. Now, something else that a local mix has that the YouTube mix doesn't have is that it's also got these sample lanes. Now, by default, these are switched off in settings. So in, I forget where this is stored now. Okay, so down here under samples, I've actually got them switched on. By default in DJ.Studio, those are switched off. So if you've got the Pro version, then you can come and switch on these samples. And basically the samples sort of add an extra 2 decks to the music set that we're creating, but they kind of work in a slightly different way to the auto mixing and that. So there's no auto mixing or transitions between samples. Samples are pretty much adding effects over the top of any music track that is being sampled into the 2 decks. But what does now happen is that down here this samples tab is live, and I've already dragged imported a sample into here. The way to import a sample is by clicking add, and we can drop samples here to import them. Sample is just an MP3 or WAV file or something that's stored locally. Again, it tells us the key signature and the speed, the beats per minute of the sample, but I can drag this sample now and put it anywhere into one of these sample tracks. So I'll put it over here at the end because this is a quieter piece of the music. And now as we play this piece of music, it'll also mix in the additional sample track. And if we want, we can just solo this sample track, so it's a mellow piano piece. If we switch off the soloing, then we go back to the mix in. So we've got the option of bringing in multiple samples to enrich the music set that we're putting together. We could have chanting appearing over a mellower piece of music or over some drumming. We can have some choir coming in and singing over the top, some birds tweeting, whatever effects that we feel that we want to enrich with. We can do this through the samples. And we can also similarly adjust things like volume and bass, mid-high filters of these particular samples. Now, while the track is playing, these are just temporary. Just anything I adjust here is temporary while it's playing back. As soon as I click stop, those changes disappear, and as soon as I click play once again, they go back to what their default setting is. We can change that if we right click on this sample. Then we can choose to add things like low, mid, high markers or a volume marker. If we do that, we now create one of these volume bars, and we get the option now of manually adjusting volume as we saw earlier. So we can seesaw this volume in and out if we want, and it does now remember these manual adjustments. So that's quite a nice feature of the local tracks. That's about the only interesting that I see what it was now saying. We can create videos, and this is quite nice actually, because it auto creates like an effect zone. It creates an animation or shade a toy. It puts we can put an image in there, or we can just add color. So if we create an animation when we play back, then it creates an automatic animation for this music set for us. And again, this overcomes some licensing restrictions. That means that certain music licensing only allows it to be played in the background to a video or something that is being played. So if we then went ahead and exported this to YouTube, then it would meet the licensing restrictions for this piece of music to only be played in the background and have a video being played at the same time. We can introduce other funky things like particles, but we're never going to use this feature for our music breathwork sets because we do not want to export to YouTube. Okay, I think that's about the only difference with a local set to the YouTube set. So we'll come out of this local set. We don't want to save the changes that we created there. And we'll go back in once more to our, it wasn't that one, it was our demo one that we were creating here. Let's open this. And just to finish this out, we'll import a few more tracks and see how this goes. So we go back to the library. We're going to go to Spotify, and actually this will be a good time to talk about the library. Let's come out of this track to discuss the library. Now, one of the important things that we need when we're creating our music, when we're building up our music library with the licensing, tracks and etc., we need to be able to keep track of where our songs are stored on our local drive. There's no software that allows us to do this that I could find. There's nothing that just works suitably. So if we have a brief look again at Spotify, if I just maximize this, I've created a number of playlists in Spotify, and the playlists are separated out to the different phases of the music set that we use in our breathwork session. And as I'm listening to a piece of music, then I think, oh, that suits maybe phase 3 or phase 4 of the music, and I'll then attach it into a particular playlist. Now sometimes we'll find a piece of music that, let's pick this one here, that may apply to more than one place. So for this particular one, you can see it may apply into phase 2 or phase 1 of the music set. And that's quite a nice feature of having this playlist feature. Unfortunately, you can't do that on a hard drive. There's no way of creating playlists on a hard drive. You'll have the physical file itself that's stored in a folder. And the only way of having it in multiple playlists, if we want to think of it in that way, is by basically making multiple copies of the track, which is going to make a rather large music database storage space for us. And there's also no way of easily tracking, does this also relate to other parts of the music that I might that I might want to use it in. So Spotify itself is actually quite nice in having this feature, but DJ.Studio doesn't have it. If we look at the library feature in DJ.Studio, it's literally like blog posts. It segments them into months and years, and the inbuilt ratings, and that's it. there's no other features in there. And this is a mix here of all local files and files imported from YouTube and Spotify and that. So it's one of the worst features of DJ.Studio at this moment in time. However, there is a wonderful piece of software that's associated with DJ.Studio, and it's called Mixed In Key. Now, if I just call up Mixed In Key, what Mixed In Key supposedly does, or does in fact do, for DJs that want to create music sets, is that it has a much stronger analysis of the key signatures of a piece of music. It also has energy ratings, so it analyzes a particular track and decides what sort of energy level that track has within it. So this is quite nice for breathwork sets, in knowing the energetic trajectory of a particular track. It also knows the tempo of each of the tracks, and it can tell us whether there's any clipped peaks where the music is too intense, and various other wonderful little bits of features that it does. I thought this was going to be a really useful addition to DJ.Studio, but actually I found out that I'm not needing to use it when I'm mixing the tracks together. But what it does bring with it is a playlist feature, and it allows us to group songs from our local file storage into different playlists. So in the same way as I created those playlists on Spotify, I've created these playlists within Mixed In Key, and I can add songs into these playlists, which is first of all a nice way of organizing them. Each, if I go to the whole collection, all of these files are all stored in one folder, so I've got no need to worry about organizing them on the hard drive. I can bundle them all into a single music database folder and simply use Mixed In Key to organize them so that I know which track I want to import into DJ.Studio. Now, the other fantastic thing is, because DJ.Studio and Mixed In Key work together, instead of just having this recently used option here, in settings, under the library option, I can choose Mixed In Key as well as various other types of library organizing software. So if you're a iTunes user, you could use iTunes to organize your music tracks, and various other ones as well. So I've only got the Mixed In Key, but what that does now is it adds this Mixed In Key tab into the library section, and you can see that it's now pulled in all of these playlists that I've created in Mixed In Key, as well as the some additional information like the energy levels of these tracks and the more deeply analyzed key signatures and beats per minute from them. And that actually makes DJ.Studio and much more usable in tracking our own music library. Let's open this. So I was going to go back into the library to import some more tracks. So we go back to the library, and again let's import some from Spotify, and let's bring Spotify back up, and this time let's pick something from the fourth phase. There's that singularity one. Let's have this one. We'll add that one in. And it's added it to the bottom of the playlist. We'll add one more from, say, the end phase. So it from the heart phase. Just picking these at random. And this is where this DJ.Studio and this YouTube kind of feature works really well in just prototyping, as I said earlier, music sets in this way. So we go back to Studio and we can now see that it's got the 4 tracks. It's auto transitioned them for us. And if we're super lucky, it actually works really well. Quite a nice transition as we come out of that. Struggling a bit with that. Let's try that again. Okay, it doesn't like that very much. But again, it's enough for prototyping, which is all we're really doing with this YouTube section of DJ.Studio. Let's switch off the video settings. Okay, and that takes us through to the end of our music set. Now, some of the other changes that we can make, now that we've got a few more songs in our set, we can look at changing some of these, and I'll just show you it's going to mess up the auto settings, and some of the transitions it's added are quite nice for this particular very small music set. But if we have a look at what we can do here in this transition window, which is the blue section here, which is the cross fade swap, crossfade on the volume, bass swap here, we can start adjusting this if we don't really want it happening there. Sometimes we want to just shrink things or adjust the length of our track, so we can drag these tracks around. So if we drag this second track and move it to the left, it's adjusting the piece of music that appears within this transition box window here, and we can see it's grayed out all of the beginning of this track, so that piece is not going to be played because mainly the volume is at 0, at minus 20 decibels, so that's nothing going to happen there. It only starts to come into effect when it hits this crossfade window. Now, it may not be what we want. We may actually want to crossfade this entire larger section of the song. And as we mouse over the crossfade, the transition, we get these little blue wings, handles appearing either side. And we can grab those and we can now extend that crossfade section. So we get a much longer crossfade that's happening here. And that just allows a bit more fine control over exactly what's happening to our music set. This probably now sounds terrible because this very loud piece of music is playing at full volume until halfway through. Then it starts to fade out. So we're not going to hear any of this gentler music that's coming in here, but we'll play it just to see. So we might just be hearing a little bit of the undertones there. If I solo this, no, the top one is completely overriding that. Now as this fades out and the music piece ends, then we're hearing this one coming through. So we would then need to adjust this, turn the volume setting to manual, and then start adjusting this. That would probably want to come in at maximum volume all the way through. This one, we would want to transition this volume out much quicker down to that stage there. And if we look at the actual track, we can see it will adjust it as the speed in that is changing from them. I believe it will anyway. Okay, so we can see that we can adjust the views of these. We can drag these tracks around to get the right position that we want the transition to work on. We can also highlight sections. We can split a track. So there's a split option here that we can split a section. We can also repeat. If I hold on the shift key on the keyboard and the mouse key, we can highlight a region, and it then gives us an option to loop certain parts of that track. That's disappeared, but if I right click on it, it gives us the option again. So if I say loop that 4 times, then we get 4 repetitions of that particular piece, 5 in total. So it's quite nice. Or if we just wanted to delete that, then that section can go. So we can edit these YouTube / Spotify tracks directly within DJ.Studio, which is quite a fantastic feature to allow us to again prototype these sections. Now these transitions here, we may decide that actually we want these 2 pieces of music very close together, so we can drag that over there, but it's not playing here because this transition only starts at this point. So we now might want to extend this transition so that it comes all the way up to where the previous transition ends. So we're kind of creating a bit more complicated mixes here now, because we've got the first track that's transitioning out to blend in with the second deck here. Then almost immediately as this transition finishes, we're then transitioning back into the third track here, which is probably going to sound horrendous. Okay, but we can see that we got that nice undertone of the Depuro as the much stronger Preliata from Globus fades in over the top of it. So it's quite powerful the way that DJ.Studio does all of this automatically for us. It adjusts all of this quite nicely. The beats per minute on these tracks happen to be very similar, which is quite nice. So that actually plays through quite nicely for us. and it's just going to slow from this halfway point from 146 beats per minute down to 145, which is not something that we're going to notice. It likes the 1A to 12A transition of the key signatures. So we can do some fairly complicated mixing of these tracks, and that's pretty much it. As breathwork facilitators who want to create our own music set lists, that literally is DJ.Studio, and what it does, how easy it does it for us, and I'm quite pleased with the way that this whole system works, and I hope you enjoy playing with it too. Okay, so I think that we are done. Thanks for watching. It's been great doing a demo. I'm enjoying the software. I hope you enjoy it too, or at least use this to compare it to the other pieces of software that that you've got demos in your bonus tracks. So I've been Dave Harper. It's been a pleasure doing this, and I hope to catch you in some neurodynamic breathwork session at some point in the future. Bye for now.